Good afternoon and welcome to our final event of the Youth and Winter Sports Congress. Our concluding session, which runs until 5:15 p.m, is co-produced by the University of Lausanne and the IOC Olympic Studies Centre. It responds to one of the aims of the Olympic Studies Centre, which is to offer dialogue between academics and the Olympic movement. The session focuses on the uniqueness of young elite athletes and the support they need. Well, inspiring images there from youth Olympians, and of course over the next 10 days or so here in Lausanne we'll be adding to that gallery of inspiration, of achievement, grace, emotion and elation. Is there anybody here who has competed in an Youth Olympic Games, or who's perhaps about to compete in this Youth Olympic Games? We know we have two here. Well, I guess you all know that behind those amazing images lives a lifetime of hard work, of sacrifices, of compromises, sometimes even blood, sweat, and a few tears. Well, the amazing life of a young elite athlete comes with a wide range of stresses and strains, along with an equally wide range of organisations and individuals who are there to try and support them. And that's our topic over this next hour and a quarter or so. In a moment, we're going to learn about the lives of two athletes in the raw, their stories. And then we have a top-notch panel of experts who are going to shed light on what can be done to support young athletes and perhaps what we should be doing more of. We'll also hear about an initiative from the IOC that particularly involves and offers an opportunity for the academics here to take part, all about how to best support young athletes as they prepare for a second career. First, though, I need your help. And usually at conferences, the message is, please turn your phones off. Please turn your phones on. Not to look at your emails, if you would, but so that you can help us. If you connect your phones to the Wi-Fi here, find the network name, which is guest UNIL. There's the access code. Can you connect as quickly as you can, please? See who takes longest to connect their phone to the Wi-Fi. I'll give you just a moment to do that. And once you've been successful, you can open up on your browser by typing in Slido. You can put in slido.com or just Slido. And it works, and you should see this. Can we see that? That's what you should see. Has anybody got that yet? Yes, put up your hands if you can see the Slido page. Good. Keep going, everybody else. If If you can't do it, maybe someone next to you can show you how to do it. And you'll be asked for an event code in Slido, and it's 2840. And when you do that, you should access our page. Success? I'm seeing some nods. Let's test it with the first question. Let's see the question, please. So the question is, what are the most significant pressures on young elite athletes? And there are some choices, and we'd like you to pick 2. You may think all 6 are relevant, but pick the 2 which you think are most important, the most pressing issues. And you should be able to connect those. You may have to go to the item marked polls if you're still struggling with the Slido page. You select polls, and it will give you this question. Are you seeing it? Yeah, it works. I hope so. I'll give you just a moment to register. And mark your answers. Now, Chris here is our master technician. Luckily, he's a PhD student, so he knows what he's doing. Chris, I'm hoping in a moment you'll give us what this room thinks are the 2 most important pressures. That's interesting. There are clearly 2 right at the top there: balancing education and sport, and sacrificing social life. I'm not sure if that's what I would have expected. We'll ask our athletes in a moment and see if that compares with their lives. But there's clearly also pressure on parental role in encouraging athletes to compete at a high level, the demands of coaches and entourage, money, finance. Perhaps I thought that would be higher, we'll see. And the temptations to cheat and take performance-enhancing drugs. Well, it gives me some comfort that that's a very low figure here amongst this particular group. It's not a representative sample group, but it's interesting that's the mood of the room. Okay, let's have a second question, please. And the second question is all about the kind of support that you feel athletes need. And I guess it will relate to the pressures that you think exist. So, which 2 areas of support are most important for young elite athletes? And you have education about sports ethics, access to sport-friendly education, planning for career beyond sport, health and injury prevention, psychological mental support and counselling, safeguarding from physical and sexual abuse, and financial support. So pick 2 out of those if you would, please. Have you registered your answers? Anyone need more time? All right, Maestro, let's see what we've got. Well, now, I find that really interesting because I assumed the kind of support would relate to the issues that you thought were most significant. But right at the top there, we have health and injury prevention advice. That's certainly a topic we're going to come back to later on. And then the second topic is psychological and mental support or counselling. Again, that's a key issue that we'll come to. We have experts on the panel on those points. Close third is career planning. And then a little beyond that is sport-friendly education and financial support. Well, fascinating. Now, actually, what we're going to do is, if we have time, we might come back to those questions at the end and see if your mind has been changed by anything that you've heard. But now let's focus on 2 people who I think of, frankly, as the stars of our show today. 2 young athletes who operate right up there at an elite level. One who's already medalled at the Olympic Games, and after a tough but hugely successful career, is now beginning to contemplate life after competition. And another who's hoping to reach a new peak in his career by attending his first Olympic Games, he hopes, in Tokyo. Well, let's meet them, let's hear their stories, and use what we hear to establish some themes to ask our experts later on. So, please give a warm welcome to Luisa Zotzkolska from Poland and Guillaume Ditois from Switzerland. Luisa, can I come to you first? And actually, I don't want to put a dampener on the mood at the moment, but I'm conscious that you're a skater. And I guess in your minds, in my mind, and I suspect all of us, we're just thinking about the poor skater the Russian skater who had an accident yesterday in the rehearsals for the opening ceremony. She's in your mind, I know you said.
Yes, of course, this is very bad news for all the skaters and for all the participants, but we hope that she will get better soon.
Thank you. I think we all pass on our best wishes to the athlete or to the skater and her family. Louisa, let's focus now on you. And actually, we have a short video here of just a few highlights that we can find from you. And I'd like you to tell us what we're seeing as we run the video, please.
So this is my last Olympic Games, Pyeongchang, less than 2 years ago. Standing on the starting line at my first race over there. That was 3 kilometers. 4 years of training to skate 4 minutes. And this is a must start. The very first time at the Olympic Games we had a must start, and that was a new experience for me and something I was really passionate about. And yeah, this is a breathtaking moment for every athlete. And even now, after so many years, I have tears in my eyes, and yeah, all the dreams came.
Thank you, Louisa. Now, Louisa very kindly actually brought the medals with her. We asked her to bring, and Guillaume, to bring just a few things with them that represented them. We can see your skates there, the suit which was made specially for you.
Yes, that suit was custom made for me. That was a Sochi Olympic Games racing suit.
The skates next to them. But the thing I'm confused about, we have what looks to me just like a shoelace.
Because this is a shoelace. I'm a speed skater, and for most of the distances we skate with only one hand, and the second one is supposed to lie on the back. And because my hand never wants to lie, I needed shoelace to put my hand there. And this is very, very old shoelace, and I use this shoelace for all my races, and this shoelace was with me at the 3 Olympic Games.
A lucky shoelace. And clearly you had to bring it here. If we see you putting it behind your back, we'll know you need the luck for being here too. Louisa, thank you for bringing all those. Why skating, and when? When did you make the choice that skating was going to be your sport?
So the first time I skated with my grandfather on the frozen lake, and that was almost 25 years ago. After that, I started primary school, and my physical education teacher saw me skating next to the school on the frozen field. I skated on figure skates, and I thought I will be dancing on the ice. But no, this coach was a speed skater coach, and he asked me to go for the training session. I live close to the Warsaw, and the training session was in Warsaw, and so because I was 9 years old, and that was pretty attractive for the kid like me to go to Warsaw. So I said yes. And I got, for the first time, I got skates for speed skating, which are, as you see, much different than figure skates. And I was pretty good on figure skates, but on this skates, during 1 hour or on my first training, I made 2.5 laps, which is 1 kilometer. That was 1 hour of training. And now my personal record for 1 kilometer is 1 minute 15 seconds.
Wow. You mentioned the coach there, and clearly for any young athlete, the coach must be a key figure. You had a number of coaches, I think, when you were young. were they all supportive and encouraging, or what kind of relationship did you have with coaches?
You know, the coaches are only the people, so there are differences between them. And my first coach he gave me the motivation to start. And when I was 14, I decided to go to the sports school, and that sports school was 300 kilometers from my hometown. And so I started to live in a boarding school. I was apart from my parents, and my second coach actually became my second father. And he was very helpful, and he wasn't with me only for the 2 hours of training session. He really was my friend, my father, my supporter in any case I wanted to. But yeah, I was pretty lucky because all of my coaches they just support me with what I wanted to do, which was skating.
But I seem to remember they didn't always encourage you to continue when you had problems.
Very true. After so many years of training and after winning even the first Olympic medal, I had my first serious accident. I broke my ACL. And as you all know, this is a very dangerous situation for the athletes to have a broken ACL. And a few days after the surgery, I asked my coach, okay, what we are doing now? We need to set the plan to get back to the sport. You know, I want to do it quick. And then my coach said, Luisa, you probably will get back to the sport, but don't expect that you're gonna be that good as you were before. And I don't know if you all is gonna believe me, but that was the biggest motivation I ever had in my career.
You raised this point about motivation. In that case, it didn't come from your coach, or it did inadvertently, but you draw your motivation mostly from inside you, or do you have other figures who feed your incentive?
I was always focused on myself, and the results I had were motivating me to go higher, to go faster, to do it better. And as we were talking about my beginnings, my parents never needed to tell me that there is a training hour that I need to go, that I might get late for the training. I always wanted to go for the trainings, and I always wanted to do it for myself. So I think that motivation was always inside me.
So for you, it wasn't pressure coming from coaches or pressure coming from parents. The pressure was inside, I guess.
No, like I felt the pressure, of course. Starting at the Olympic Games, it's always very stressful, and you have a pressure from everywhere. But the biggest pressure I had was the pressure I made on myself.
Let's go back to young Louisa. You were, I think you said 9. So basically, ever since you were 9, you were operating as an elite athlete. That, I guess, must mean you've had to make some sacrifices.
Yeah, I was very surprised that you picked that the young athlete needs to sacrifice the social life, because I started to train because of the social life. We were spending 1 hour driving to the ice rink and get back from the ice rink. So that was 2 hours in the bus with my friends, mostly the school friends, but we wasn't at the school. So that was the best time ever. And except that, we were spending a lot of time together, maybe not as different kids, because sometimes they were, trying smoking cigarettes around the corner or something like this. But we were still, I was still with my friends, with school friends, but we were doing something which was a passion for us. So I never felt like I lost social life because of the sport.
You mentioned your parents earlier, and you said they were not a major driver for you. They didn't push you into the sport, but I also know that your mother is a particularly significant figure for you. Tell me more about that.
My mom was always she was always standing on my behind my backs, and she was supporting me in every aspect of my life. And because I'm from Poland, and for the long time we didn't have an ice rink in Poland. We needed to travel to Germany or other places, and I spent a lot of time abroad. Sometimes my mother took when I was back home, she took days off from her work to help me with laundry, to help me pack and unpack my suitcases, and and she never put me on pressure because of my results. She was always repeating me that everything I will do in my life, it would be the best for her, and that all of the choices are mine, but she is still she has a finger crossed for me always.
That's a wonderful story. Were you ever able to demonstrate your gratitude to her?
Of course, one of the things is when I won my first money from skating. I bought something for her.
What did you buy?
I bought her a fridge. Because I knew that she needed a new fridge at that time. I was 18. I won my first money on the competition, and I bought my mom a fridge. And she has this fridge till now. And now she's collecting magnets from all over the world. The magnets which I'm bringing her from all of my...
Fridge like that one?
All of my trips are still on the fridge.
Louisa, that's a great way to finish. That's Louisa's honours board, I guess. The fridge in her mom's house that she bought and has all the fridge magnets from where she's performed. Louisa, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Guillaume, let's move into your story now. Once again, we have a video here, which if you can talk us through what we're seeing, and particularly I think you'll need to explain some of the dives for us. Thank you.
So this is my first dive in a youth Olympic game. So the first dive in a Olympic level, and hopefully not the last. This is a 2.5 word. This is very difficult to talk about it, like when you don't really know diving, but that wasn't my first dive.
It looks perfect.
Yeah, it looks like better than now, probably. Okay, so that was the second one. This is a front 3.5, and the biggest difficulty is like the hurdle. And when you're very stressed, not to fall down off the board. This is the main point.
the result of months and months of training, I guess, for each one of those dives.
Yeah, years.
And here we are.
Okay, so I would like you to pay attention on the gym, how it is. This is a gym in Germany, and well, just behind, this is the gym in my pool. So well, this is next to like this is very fresh, and this is a front 4.5, my hardest actually dive. And I had to learn it for many years.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Jim, I'm guessing that dive is one you're already training with the hope of getting to Tokyo?
Yes, that was this is very fresh, so this is very full in for Tokyo.
Well, we're all rooting for you.
Let's
go back a few years though. Why diving? Why did you pick diving?
Well, I started diving because of my biggest brother, and as a small brother, you want to do like your big brother. And of course, the flying time is something I really appreciate, and that's why I started diving.
And I guess you must love spending time in the water and swimming as well.
In fact, I'm scared. I'm scared of water, and I'm a very bad swimmer, and like I'm doing diving for flying, more for swimming.
I find that extraordinary. So it's that short period when you're actually in the air that you enjoy, not the bit when you hit the water.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel like I'm very free in the air, and I can do everything I want to. So that's the real moment I like, I appreciate.
So how old were you when you started in competition? We heard that Louisa was maybe 9.
Yeah, for the first competition around 9. Yeah, I started diving when I was 8, around 9, 10, maybe the first competition.
So you've spent, I guess, 2/3 of your life as an elite athlete.
Yeah, even more.
More.
Yeah.
I have to ask you the same question. Do you feel, I know you feel you've had an amazing set of experiences, but have you had to make any sacrifices to do that?
I had to do many sacrifices, of course. For me, the first choice you pick it up was the right one for me. But like even if there's many sacrifice, there's many good experience. And like I would do the same again. Like this is a very perfect experience for me, very enjoyable.
And where do you draw your motivation, your incentive to keep going back and learning and exercising, training the new dive again?
I have a great experience with the social life. And going in every country, meeting many other athletes, many people is very great for me. And this is one of the reasons I keep doing it. Of course, I like the sports, still the flying time. But one of the biggest experience was meeting people. So like, as you can see here in the Lausanne, there is many athletes. And I hope they're gonna talk to each other.
And I think, one of the other balances every athlete has to make is the one between education, learning and sport. How has that worked out for you?
Quite bad. No, like it was really difficult because like the school here in Switzerland doesn't have the right help at this moment. Because like I had to train a lot and I had the normal school. So I had to do 2 full-time jobs, and it didn't work good for me at this point. I was at the moment I was tired doing diving and tired going to school, so that was the main problem for me. Now I did find finally after years and years my way to do education, but it took me a long time, and like I could not follow the normal education as the people do.
Another factor that was listed in the poll was money. Has that been a challenge for you?
It's big. It's been a big challenge. It would be one of the first challenge I would put, because like if you don't have money, so I'm talking from my experience, if you don't have money, you cannot have the any other support. In fact, you cannot have injury support or health support or going to a massage or something like this. So if you don't have the money, you cannot do sports, in fact, for like here in Switzerland. Like If I have no money, I cannot go to competition because I have to pay my competition. Even if I want to go to world level competition, I will need to pay.
And where did you eventually manage to find a source of funding? Because I mean, we imagine that Switzerland, it's a wealthy country. We would imagine its elite sports people would be well supported. Where did you find support?
Well, I did find support after I qualified myself for Junior World Championships, and I couldn't go because it was too expensive for me, and I had to ask some people. And one foundation, Cookie, and I'm saying big thanks to them, they helped me with the financial support, and then I could go to other competition and have a name, and then when you have the name, you can ask for money. But you need money to go in a competition to get the name, so that was the...
I guess when I look at both of you, you both look like the pictures of fitness and health, but Louisa already talked about an injury that almost stopped your career. Have you had any challenges on injuries?
Well, yes, I did break my back. I did break nearly everything of my body, I guess. And yeah, this takes time. Like mentally, this is also very difficult because like you have to push your body to the limits. And the problem is when you reach the limits, then your body just breaks. And this is a very difficult point to have knowledge and people helping you to know where your limit is.
I have to ask you, I can't contemplate someone who's broken their back doing what we saw you doing in the video. How did it happen? How did you break your back?
First of all, I had a coach which was really bad. He was just pushing my back very difficult. Like you know, in diving, as you can see on the picture over there, we have to be flexible, and to get this flexibility, you need to push a bit. And he was pushing me very hard, and he made me start diving in 10 meters when I was too young, and the shock was too strong for my back. It broke.
In general, have you found that coaches have been sensitive and sympathetic to your general development above and beyond sport, or was that coach unique?
That coach was quite unique for me. Yeah. Like he was my main coach when I was young. He pushed me. I think like I have to be grateful with him because like I would not have this level right now if he wasn't here. But it was good when he left, I think. And like the second coach was much better for me. She was thinking of those kind of injury, of my limits, my psychological limits, and we worked together.
Guillaume, we all wish you every success in Tokyo. I know you're beginning to wonder what life will be like after Tokyo, but in the meantime, we all hope you qualify in Tokyo. Please give a big round of applause to Guillaume.
Thank you.
Well, I found that fascinating. Plenty, I think, for our panel to get to grips with. What I'm going to do is ask each of our panellists just to introduce yourselves, who you are, what you do, and just give us your immediate response to what you heard from Louisa and Guillaume. Start off, Christine.
Sure, thank you. Well, I'm a medical doctor from Norway, Oslo, and a specialist in physical medicine and rehabilitation, also a sports physician. And I work at the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences and the Oslo Sports Trauma Research Centre, and with the Get Set that I hope you are all familiar with. I just delivered my thesis on youth elite athletes and injuries and illnesses, and I've been a medical doctor for the Norwegian cross-country team, which I'm not anymore. Now I'm with the youth elite national soccer girls. And for, do you want me to yeah? Okay, so thanks a lot for sharing. Very, very nice stories. And I think it's really intriguing, and you show so beautifully how coaches are so important. Both, we know also from studies that coaches are important if you're injured, because we know that a supportive coach will make it much better for the athletes and maybe also prevent burnout if you have a coach that supports you. Whereas if you don't, you feel lonely and are at a greater risk of not returning if you've had an injury. So thank you for that, both of you.
Thank you. Camilla?
Good afternoon, my name's Camilla Knight. I'm an Associate Professor in Sports Science, specialising in sports psychology. I've spent the last 10 to 12 years researching particularly around parents' involvement in sport. So I found it interesting in both of the stories around the role of the family. Grandfather starting off one story, brother starting off the other. So I'm particularly interested in recognising the broader social network that influences the development of athletes.
Thank you, Camilla. Tuelo?
Thank you very much. I am Tuelo Serufo from Botswana. I'm Secretary General of the Botswana National Olympic Committee. I, as a tennis player when I was younger, and I then became a coach, worked with young elite, perhaps by Botswana standards, athletes, and over the last decade or so, I've mainly focused on international youth competitions, both at international youth competitions, and I have liked a few things about what they've said, especially the role that coaches play in assisting young athletes, and also the effect that unlike in certain instances, they were allowed the latitude of choice insofar as the sports they're practicing is concerned. Thanks.
Thank you, Tuelo. Chantal?
Good afternoon. My name is Chantal Buxer. I'm working at the International Olympic Committee, managing Athlete 365 Career Plus, which is the IOC's program to support athletes in their transition to life after sport, but also supporting younger elite athletes in dual career. Here in the Athletes Village, we've got some programs and activities as part of the athlete education program that we're delivering. What really stuck out to me, similar to what Camilla mentioned, was the role of the family, and I thought it especially interesting what Louisa mentioned of family playing the motivating and inspirational role, but also recognizing when that strong push isn't necessarily needed, when the motivation is more intrinsic.
Thank you, Chantal. Now, I have to tell you, I have so many questions that I want to ask our experts here, but I'm also open to any of your questions or your comments. You can do it in the traditional way by raising a hand if you'd like to ask them a question that way, or you can use Slido. You can go back to Slido, and we've created a space where you can simply register your questions, and Chris will alert me when there are questions that have come in, and we'll hear your questions, so you can go back to Slido. Let me start, though, with Christine, because I was struck by both athletes had really pretty horrific injury records. Is that normal? How many young elite athletes face injuries?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's at least not a normal. We know from studies both in Norway and in Sweden and in the Netherlands, then youth elite athletes, these are like between 15, 16, 17, have a prevalence of maybe 43% are injured or ill every single week. And those 43% have reported injuries or illnesses every single week, yeah. And of course it depends on sport categories. Endurance athletes have maybe more illnesses and not so much injuries, whereas for technical sports like diving or for team sports, there are more injuries. So yes, it's really a big problem, and we also see that girls also report somewhat more health problems than boys.
And does your research tell you how many of those injuries are short-term problems that get resolved, and how many in other ways are long-term, perhaps have an impact for the rest of the athlete's life?
Well, at least we know that at any given time, 1 in 4 have more serious injuries or illnesses that affect their participation or performance in a moderate way or worse. And there's also a Swedish study showing us that at injuries at Swedish sport academies, 1 1/5 of those injuries are injuries that affect normal training for 2 months or more.
Guillaume, can I just come back to you for a moment? Because I have to say I was astonished that you are an athlete planning to go to the Tokyo Olympic Games to do diving with a partially broken back. Is that something that is now completely resolved, or will that have an impact for a long time for you?
It will be here forever, I think. Like, my spine did move, so it's still moving right now. But with the good physical condition, should be all right. So I will keep doing conditioning for the rest of my life.
I think maybe you should have a conversation afterwards with Christine. Christine, has your research managed to identify, I'm going to say, the causes of injuries? I think we know that athletes push themselves to their limits, but particularly the causes of injuries for young athletes. What are the main drivers that might help you to find ways to mitigate the issues?
Oh, I don't think it's easy to say that it's one thing, really. But of course, growth and maturity, and they have immature muscles, immature tendons, immature skeletal systems. So those are one thing. And like Guillaume and I was talking about there, they don't get to decide for themselves. They are learning along the way also. What is my limit? How much should I be pushed? Or how much, especially for those who reach to be an elite athletes. And
we heard Guillaume talking about his coach, he believed, pushing him too early into the high dive.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's so important that coaches for young athletes know that these athletes are not mini adults. They're completely different, and I guess Camilla will agree with me on that. They have a complete different body system, hormone system. Some of them haven't reached puberty, some are in puberty, some are after puberty, and their mental health, their brain is not fully developed either. So all of these are important things to keep in mind when working with youth.
And I guess some sports are more prone to injuries than others, or at least particular kinds of injuries associated with some sports?
Yes, we have, like for instance, team sports. You have, like I said, a lot of injuries, and some studies have also shown that for some younger athletes there are maybe more overuse injuries because of the immature skeletal systems. But there is still a lot of research to be done on this field, really.
There's a strange balance here, isn't there? Because all of us in this room are passionate about sport. We would like nothing more than to encourage the next generation to become sports people. And yet, everything you're saying makes us think perhaps this is too dangerous. How do you get the balance right?
Yeah, that's maybe the big the big question. But I think talking to the youth athletes all the time is very important. Good communication and trust between the athlete and the coach, and also that the different coaches speak together, and also that the parents and the coaches speak together. And if they are injured, I think it's of utmost importance also that the physician or the physiotherapist and the coach also make a plan together with the young athletes, because a lot of them feel so lonely when they're injured. So they feel like, like Louise said, it's so social. She loved to be with all the other athletes, and all of a sudden when you're injured or ill, you cannot be with them anymore. So that's also a big loss, really.
Louisa, in that time when you had the injury where your coach was effectively saying it was the end of your career, but you decided otherwise, did you feel that sense of loneliness that Christine talked about?
You know who was with me at that time? My mom and my family. And that's it. Actually, I'm pretty sure some of my teammates, they were happy that I'm out. I was we were competitors, so I could always count for my family.
We've got some questions that some of you have submitted. Thank you. We won't have time to go through them all, but Christine, can I ask you to look at the first question, please? Should sports organisation increase their regulations on coaches?
I think I'm more into using, how do you say it in English, like education and working with communication rather than being too strict, kind of. So I think the way to go is to, actually we're working on this in Norway now, to educate, to train the trainers. We have sport physicians and sport doctors who now will be trained to seek to all the clubs, the local clubs in Norway, and to train them about growth and maturity, about how to make good injury prevention training, because we have this Get Set Train Smarter app, and we also had the website fit2play.org, where so we're teaching them, which are for free and for everyone to use. So we're teaching them on how to build happy and resilient and more athleticism in their youth athletes. And I think one major point is also to encourage them to be patient about their youth athletes.
Thank you. I guess you maybe want to comment on the second question there about asthma medicine. Can you see the question?
Well, I guess I don't really agree on that.
If it's a very specialist question, maybe whoever asked that question of Christine, you could chat about that one afterwards. Would that be better? Okay.
Sure, I'd like to.
Look, there are many more questions. We may have a chance to come back to this important topic of injury prevention, but I need to move on to Camilla because, in a sense, we've looked at the body, the mind. I don't know about you, but I thought Louisa and Guillaume demonstrated that they came through the astonishing pressures of them, appeared to be in remarkably good shape. But how much is this emerging area of focus on the mental and the mind and the stresses that athletes, how much is that now matching injury prevention as a key topic?
It's becoming massive. I think anyone who's involved in sport will recognise the importance of understanding the mental aspect of the game, of whatever event you're participating in, and making sure that that is supported. Unfortunately, in a number of sports, there's still budget considerations, and lots of people will still say, we can't afford sports psychologists, or we can't afford to have a sports psychologist involved. That's kind of a decision that people make. You know, where are you ranking sports psychology? You know, we often put it much lower than I would like to see it personally.
Christine said that 43% of elite athletes had injuries. Maybe we don't really know, but what percentage of young athletes do you think have challenges of a mental nature, of a stress?
This isn't evidence-based, but I would say probably 100%. I think every athlete is working with stresses and challenges. There's being involved in an elite setup, particularly from a young age, is extremely demanding, and I haven't been fortunate enough to be in that position, so I don't personally know, but I've worked with a lot of young athletes. I've worked with athletes from as young as 6 who are throwing up before they compete, who are really finding it very anxiety-inducing. So, you know, for me, I would say across the board, we need to be making sure that athletes from a young age get the best mental support they can, because if we teach the really good skills at a young age, then they're going to help athletes all of the way through. And also making sure that coaches are well educated in this area and parents are well educated in this area, because everyone who interacts with a young athlete has the potential to impact on their psychological development. So I think it's really, really important, and I would say whilst it's great to see increasing attention given to it, we're still not funding it enough or giving it as much attention as it needs.
But just like we think that doing sport makes us fit and healthy rather than injured and sick, I guess many of us imagine that doing sport is good for our minds. It builds in resilience, the importance of competition. Isn't it a good thing for our mental development as well?
We joke, I work in sports science, and we joke about this idea that people think sport is healthy. Sport at the elite end is not healthy. There's nothing about elite sport that is healthy physically or mentally. When you're really pushing yourself over time, of course, you develop great resilience, you develop a lot of mental skills, but it's challenging, it's pushing the body to the limit. Exercise, that's healthy. You know, we can probably agree on that. But I think, you know, it's great to see at the moment there's a big recognition of the mental health challenges that elite athletes are encountering. Within research, we're seeing a lot more of that. Reassuringly, the statistics are very similar for elite athletes as the general population in terms of how many people are struggling with mental health issues or mental health concerns. But for a long time, athletes haven't felt that they've been able to talk about them because we believe that if you're going to be an elite athlete, you must be mentally strong. So I think, you know, there's a lot of challenges from the mental side, definitely.
We heard from Guillaume and Louisa a range of sources of potential stress. Sometimes it's built up inside because you're determined you're going to achieve. Sometimes it's coming from the coach that is motivated because of their performance. Sometimes there are parents who push and push. Where do you see the greatest sources of stress?
I would say that would be unique to each athlete. I think you'll have some athletes who will internalize pressure and who will really, really push themselves, and that will be their main source of stress. Obviously, there's some well-documented athletes who've really had to struggle against the pressures of their parents. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of stories around coaches who've pushed too hard. So I don't think we can say one is maybe bigger than the other. I would say it would depend on that athlete's journey. But definitely the outside influences can have a big part to play. And
are there major differences in those sources of pressure according to the sport? Are some sports particularly prone to this? Or indeed in some cultures, in some parts of the world, perhaps in richer or poorer countries?
If there's any academics in the room, this is a great place to do some research because we are very definitely dominated still with the Western cultures, particularly when we look at parents' involvement. We definitely know that the more money that's invested from family and from parents leads to greater perceptions of pressure. So you could argue that those parents who have greater income to put into sport, that might lead to more pressure, but definitely individual sports that are heavily reliant on family, that's going to lead to parents maybe being more involved. But then if you're in a team sport, you've got the social pressures and potentially the negative peer involvement. So, you know, I'm not giving you a straight answer here because unfortunately it's not a straight question.
Sounds like a research project in there. I'm going to version the second question for you, I think, Camilla, because the question there is the evolution of events such as YOG. Is that a good thing? We heard that both our elite athletes here started at kind of 8 or 9. Is that a good thing for us? Should we be promoting athletes to compete at a high level very early on, or should we be trying to delay it?
I feel like there's a politically correct response to that question, given where we are, and maybe a different one. I think it's very easy to say we shouldn't be putting young athletes in these elite competitions because of the pressures, but then on the other hand, if we put young athletes into these sorts of competitions, they have an opportunity to learn how to cope with the pressures. So there's definitely kind of pros and cons. I go back maybe to my first answer, to my response to the first question, which is if we're going to put these sorts of events on, we need to make sure the athletes have the support that they need throughout their career, whether it's when they're 8 or 9 or when they're 15, 16 or, you know, as they're heading into retirement. So, you know, I'm going to sit on the fence as to whether we should or shouldn't have Youth Olympic Games, but I think making sure that the support is there is the most important thing.
So whatever age elite sport takes place, it's providing the right support, be it mental, physical. But that's a great cue to go to Tuelo, because in that context we've just heard about, what role do you think the National Olympic Committee and National Sports Federation should be playing?
They obviously need to educate and also ensure that the infrastructure that is available to support the athletes is the right one. I think one of the issues I picked earlier is that in a lot of instances, especially us in Africa and perhaps other not so developed parts of the world, we get our coaches to be masters of all, where a coach is a trainer, is a psychologist, and at the same time, and certainly they don't have competence in all of those areas. They have the love to do it, but they are inadequate and may end up leading athletes to do the wrong things and in the process endangering the athletes.
And that must be the reality in many, many parts of the world, in many sports, I guess, that can't afford to have specialist injury prevention sports psychologists and other things. So, and I know you're leading initiatives in Botswana and surrounding countries to try and provide more support to athletes. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, we... obviously, there's the long-term athlete development philosophy that as Botswana we've adopted, and we have sold it to many other countries in the region. Within the LTAD, there are certain principles that would assist them, for instance, in avoiding burnout, injuries, etc., like not pushing athletes to specialize early, and taking into consideration that athletes do not grow at the same rate, and therefore, or even that winning, for instance, at a elite youth competition is not necessarily an indicator of success in future. So there's that. We obviously also have a special interest in safeguarding of our young athletes on the back of what has happened with US gymnastics and other cases. So we've developed a training manual and are currently working on training trainers and of course involving athletes in the process. And we are also doing quite a bit of work in educating our coaches and other athlete support personnel.
And although you're now clearly a very significant sports leader, I think you're also an athlete, still are an athlete. How much do you draw on your own experience when you're formulating policy and plans now?
Well, I do draw quite extensively on my own experience, but at the same time, I think we are cautious not to think what happened so many years ago there as an athlete, and what is happening now, exactly the same issues and or challenges. And to that extent, we endeavor and we do take deliberate effort to involve athletes. But at the same time, I mean, it's a bit of a tricky situation because we are also cognizant of the fact that the athletes may not have the experience to be wise, the experience to inform policy, for example, but we still desire to benefit from their thoughts. And so we try and find that balance of having them involved in policy formulation and some of the programming that we do through our national federations, etc.
Twila, can I put the same question about YOG to you? Because the question says, how dangerous can the evolution of such events as YOG be? But let me ask you the other way around and say, how do you believe YOG can provide a role model for how athletes should be supported? What should YOG be doing? What is YOG doing to provide the best environment to support young athletes?
I think, if there is no YOG, in certain instances you'd have young athletes being thrust into big competitions, and sometimes that doesn't work too well for them because then they don't perform exceptionally well, and all of a sudden they believe they are not good enough. So I think one advantage of the YOG is that it allows them to compete with their peers, but it also prepares them to be able to deal with the greater stresses as they'll be graduating to the senior elite competitions. So it's not a bad concept, but like they have said, we obviously need to ensure that there's comprehensive support, given that it's young athletes that are at Youth Olympic Games and live competitions.
And I know that in YOG, and indeed in the Olympic Games itself, there's often a lot of work done and discussions with coaches. But how much do you think it's possible to motivate and incentivize coaches above and beyond purely the performance of the athletes? Is it possible to motivate a coach to succeed in a well-rounded individual that emerges as well as an elite athlete? How difficult is that?
Please
At the moment, I guess most coaches are rewarded or are incentivized by how well their athletes perform on the track in the competition.
Yeah.
But I know through YOG and other events, we try and encourage coaches to think about the broader growth and development of the individual. It's a difficult balance though, isn't it?
It is, and but I think NOCs and Sports Federation can play a role in assisting with that balance. I mean, us in Botswana, for instance, set targets for the main Olympic Games, but we don't do the same for Youth Olympic Games. We would often encourage our athletes to go out there and have fun, and whatever result they bring, I mean, we'd be happy. The mere fact that they were able to earn themselves as sport at the Youth Olympic Games is good enough. And we are trying to send the same message to the coaches to say it's not about bringing so many golds and or silver medals, but it's about allowing the young athletes the opportunity to go and meet others, build friendships, and then learn for the future. So it's difficult, but it can be achieved with proper systems and support.
Thank you, Twella. Chantal, I'm sure the IOC simply can't look after every single young elite athlete, but on the other hand, the IOC has a vital role to play in setting standards, policy being the benchmark. Tell us about some of the things that you're involved in at the IOC does in this space.
Happily. I think one of the main initiatives or sources of programming and resources we have in this area is through the Athletes Entourage Commission. This commission was started a few years ago and is under the leadership of its chair, Sergei Bubka. And the Entourage Commission is an opportunity to bring together representatives from these different touch points that are so close to the athletes. So we've got a coach, a family member, agent, manager, medical doctor, someone from an academic institution, so that they can provide their feedback on how to best support athletes, but also with their experience in working with athletes to ensure that the IOC and the Olympic movement is most informed about what athletes truly need from these people that are so critical to their lives. So some of the activities and initiatives coming from the Commission, including the safeguarding toolkit, that topic was brought up a number of times. Here in the village, we've got a safe sport activation where athletes can learn about workshops and toolkits available for them. There's also guidelines and tips for some of these different segments. So there's tips for parents depending on the sporting level of their athlete. And there's also, here in the village, again, we've got an activity where it helps the young athletes to understand the value of having a close, trusted group of people close to them that are not just looking out for their sporting performance, but also their life outside of sport as well.
Chantal, even here in Switzerland, we heard Guillaume saying he had a really challenging time balancing schooling and elite sport, and that came as a surprise to me. What can the IOC do to encourage athletes to remember the value of education for both their time in sport and afterwards?
Yeah. I think it's always a really big challenge to communicate importantly enough to athletes the value of maintaining their academic studies, even though that in many cases will present challenges to them, because unfortunately not all academic institutions are flexible and understanding of first, the value that having student athletes will bring to their institution, but then with that, the special accommodations that those student athletes may require to continue their studies. So that's something we're always trying to highlight. I think one of the challenges we find is that all countries and academic institutions are different. So one thing we're working on now is trying to see what resources are out there in terms of the key attributes that those working with the athletes should have to best support their student athletes. So kind of the key attributes that these dual career practitioners can have, so that the Onus isn't necessarily on the academic institutions alone, but those that are close to the athletes, how they can best support the athletes that they're working with.
I imagine most people in their late teens, between 18 and 20, are beginning to think about their career. We heard both Guillaume and Louisa saying they're now beginning to think about their next career after sports competition. Is that right? Both of you are having to think now about what's happening next. Is that something the IOC can help with?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned, we've got our Athlete 365 Career Plus program. We deliver this through 3 channels. One is through online resources that anyone can access on Athlete 365, our online platform and community for elite athletes and Olympians. We also have a series of workshops that we deliver via national Olympic committees and international federations that are focusing on this topic and providing athletes with some tools. And then some national Olympic committees have programs of their own. So we try through these channels to ensure that as many athletes can benefit from this program as possible.
Chantal, there's a question here at the top, which I think I'll ask you to address. How often are you trained, thinking and acting based on one goal of Olympism to promote a peaceful society concerned with the preservation of human dignity? I guess if any organisation should focus on that, it's the Olympic movement. Can you talk on that one?
Yeah, it's a big question. I think it is always important to keep those Olympic values in mind. But having spent yesterday in the village, you just need 1 minute in there to be reminded of the Olympic values. And I think what's so unique about Youth Olympic Games is the age group of the athletes here. They don't necessarily need to be always reminded of it. They are teenagers. They are excited to be here. They are excited to meet one another. And the interactions and learnings from being at an event like this happen really organically and naturally. So I think to be reminded of how Olympism can promote peace in society and build a better world through sport, just go out to the competition venues or in the village and you'll see it firsthand.
Well, let me be provocative to Guillaume and Louisa. When you're competing for these, the most significant thing that you can possibly imagine is these. How much during those hours and hours and weeks and months and years of training do you think about the goals of Olympism to promote a peaceful society? Or is it only once you've won them that you can use them to do that? Louisa?
Definitely, when I have them, I can use them to... this is actually my platform to talk to people about friendship, about setting the goals, about reaching those goals, about really a lot of values which are unique for sport and for life. But when I was a young athlete, I only dreamed about competing at the games. I never dreamed about the medals. The Olympic Games were my goal.
So Guillaume, when you're bouncing in the gym there off that and trying not to injure yourself, are the Olympic values there in mind, or is it just sitting somewhere below? You just know it's always there.
I think it's I know it's here, but when I'm training, I'm just thinking about training, you know? The value, they're here always, but like you really think about training, that's all.
Yeah. Before we thank our panelists, I'm going to ask each of you, if you can, one very succinct piece of advice that you could give to the athletes who are going to inspire us over the next 10 days. The yoga athletes, they're about to start their performance, a big moment for them. One piece of advice reflecting your background. Christine, can you come first?
Well, I would like to say that both for all of us stakeholders and for the athletes, remember they are 24-hour youths. They need to keep their balance in life, and that comes also to count between training and competition, in and out of sport activities, and use the Get Set and Fit to Play places. It's for free. And if you're injured, it can also be a good thing.
as it was for Louisa.
Yes. Don't blame yourself. Make a plan with your physio and coach, and it can give you more self-confidence and make you better equipped to become an elite athlete.
Thank you very much. Camilla, a short piece of advice from you, please.
Mine would simply be focus on yourself, your process and your goals. Don't worry about what other people are doing and the expectations of others.
Perfect. Twella?
I would say they should know their rights, one, and secondly, they should know that the expectations of the society or the community should be secondary. Rather, they should focus on what they themselves as athletes want to achieve. And of course, finally, they are still young. They should have as much fun as possible now.
Chantal, I suspect that may be what you were going to say.
Yeah, to make the most of the experience, there's a lot that they can learn about what's available to them as young athletes, and just have fun.
With that, would you thank our panellists, please? But before we wrap, as you've heard, the IOC is active in many of these spaces, and it's active in another area to support young athletes, and that's academic research. So to tell us about a new initiative here, please welcome Nuria Puig from the Olympic Studies Centre.
Thank you very much, Bill. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, the last part of this two-day conference. So as Bill mentioned at the beginning, the Olympic Studies Centre is promoting dialogue between the academic community and the Olympic movement. This roundtable is a little bit an illustration of this. The Olympic Studies Centre is also collecting, sharing the most up-to-date, accurate and relevant information, especially for the academic community. And we are also funding research. So one of the grant programs we have is the Advanced Research Grant Program, where we identify priority fields of research in collaboration with our colleagues of the IOC departments. And for the next edition of the Advanced Grant Program, the 2021 edition, we have 11 priority fields of research. 4 of them are related to athletes. And one of them is especially important for the topic today, is related to dual careers. So within this aspect, this year, we are asking researchers, all of you, to think about how dual career can be also important for sports performance. So we have read many times that it's important to have a balanced life, and how this balanced life, we think, it can be really also important and positive for sports performance. So with the grant program this year, we are encouraging researchers to do research analyzing based on the experience of researchers from different sports, from different countries, and from different social and economical contexts to analyze if really this dual career is positive for their performance. So you have the information in the slide. The academics that having a PhD can apply to our advanced grant program. The grant awards are of $20,000 per 1 year academic project, and we have the deadline at the end of this month. So we call for action. We hope that some of you can apply to this grant program, can be individual or collective projects, and of course there are projects related to athletes, but you will see if you go to the website, Olympic/studies, the website, the web page of the IOC Olympic Studies Centre, that we have several topics dealing with other aspects such as legacy of the Olympic Games, sport for development, sport ethics and governance, and so on. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Nuria. Thank you. And I could see Guillaume where as soon as he saw $20,000 there, he's had to work so hard to raise some money. He was beginning to think, how could I get $20,000 into my sport training? But thank you for that. That's a great and important initiative. We're almost finished now, but I want to go back, if I may, to those questions we asked on Slido. I can't remember, in truth, the answers you gave last time, but Chris, I think, has kept a tally. Maybe you can't remember what you elected to vote for last time. Can we go back? Oh, there we are. Those are the results from before, where the top two were education, sport, and training and competition. Let's ask the question again, please. If you can take that off so that we don't influence ourselves. Let's go back and see if we can reset, and can you answer the questions again in the light of what you've heard? So pick the two most significant pressures on young elite athletes. Try not just to put whatever you did last time. Think about it again based on everything you've now heard. I can see lots of phones in use. I hope you're not all just checking out your emails. Have you all managed to register? Shall we see, Chris, how the answers are formulating now? Whoa, that's certainly a change from before. A very dramatic shift to education and sport. I think that was the top one before, is that right, Chris? That was the top, but it was around about 50-something%. And now we're at 80%. So I think, Guillaume, your story of the experience you had as a factor. Money has now become the second option. Again, probably based on some of the stories we heard. What was second last time, Chris? Can you remember? Sorry? Sacrificing social life, which at least for our two athletes here, they were inclined to say that actually they gained a social life through being involved in elite sport. So now we have chasing funding to survive as an elite athlete as the first and second. Okay, let's go back to the second question then, please, about support. Let's not see the answers this time, Chris, if we can. Let's just go straight on to the question and re-ask the same question about what support do elite athletes require. And panelists, if you have your phones, you can enter this as well, you know. So which two areas of support are most important for young athletes? Pick two from education, sport ethics, access to sport-friendly education, planning for life and career beyond sport, health and injury prevention advice, psychological mental support, safeguarding from different forms of abuse, and financial support. How are we doing? Have we registered our answers? Okay, should we have a look then, Chris? And can you remind us of the top two before?
It was also health and injury and also the psychological mental.
Those were the top two, but if I remember rightly, the percentages were somewhat different. I think the health and injury prevention advice was significantly lower. It was the top one, but that's gone extremely high, and we had a fascinating discussion about that. Psychological mental support, I think, is consistently the second one. Well, thank you. I think one of the things that tells me is that the value of hearing directly from athletes and then the analysis given from athletes has had an impact on us all. It certainly has on me. Thank you for all of your participation in this event. I hope you don't mind if we give our athletes the last word. But I want to ask them one more question, but while they're doing that, we have one more question for you when it comes to the last word. One more Slido question, which is the word you would like to submit. We'll just see if we can build a little word cloud. The single word that describes the kind of support you would like young elite athletes to receive. It's a tough one, isn't it? Just one word. See if you can do that, and then I'm going to come for their conclusions to our athletes. Don't agonise over it, just come with the first word that springs into your head, and we'll see how that looks. Okay. It's building. Keep going. Has everybody submitted yet? Let's keep that running. And my final question to our two athletes. Take yourselves back, if you would. Sit in the time machine. Go back to when you, I think, were 9, when you first put the skates on and went off to the first competition. And you were 8, I think, when you started competitive diving. If you could go right back to that stage then, but you now you know everything you know now, how would you change the career that you've had? Louisa.
First of all, the life is very limited, and it wouldn't be different time for being elite athletes than that time. So if I wouldn't start when I was 9, I wouldn't sit here with 2 Olympic medals now. So definitely I would go the same way. And that would be very risky, but I would even say that I like the fact that I broke my ACL. I become much more stronger after that.
Wow. Guillaume?
Well, I'll go in her way, and I'm very happy with this. I will change absolutely nothing. That was brilliant for me and very
Fantastic.
good experience.
And I'm going to ask you two to talk us through this word cloud and see if you think, much more important, what you believe out of those words for the kind of support that you think young athletes and the generation beyond you should have. Just tell us what you see and whether you think it sums up correctly. Guillaume?
It looks very nice, and we'll put exactly the same. The fun is very perfect here.
Louisa, if you could turn that into a T-shirt for the athletes in the Olympic Village, would you do that?
I think the love, fun, and mental support are very important. I would also say that the support after career, if the athletes would like to know that when they finish, they have other life and other things to do, and also they will have support. Yeah.
Maybe we should add that too. Thank you so much for your honesty and your generosity in sharing your experiences and your thoughts with us, and thank you to our panellists, and thank you all for contributing. May you have a wonderful time during the Youth Olympic Games. Thank you all.
And just outside of this room will be some drinks, and you're welcome. Will be also a prize and some information from the Frontiers review, and so we'll take 2 minutes or 5 minutes to give the prize. Thank you. Just outside we'll give that.